Chapter 38 Meeting His Nurse Again. Jiro's eyebrows grew long enough before the new semester began in September. His face was still mottled, but it was not so ghastly as to be feared by his friends, so he made up his mind to go to school. On the other hand, Otami was in a serious condition. On the first day of school, the Masakis concluded that he should be absent from school. Jiro was disappointed. He wanted to see Ryuichi and hear about his experience in Tokyo. He also wanted to know when Haruko would go to Tokyo again. The school was within half an hour's walk. He wanted to attend, if only for a minute. These past few days, however, Otami looked very lonely unless she could see Jiro. She looked forward to him at any moment and was satisfied to take the bitter medicine from his hand. She eagerly wanted him to grip her hands too. He was very glad to be wanted in such a way, so he took care of his sick mother with his whole heart. He had never felt such a delight before. His desire to meet Ryuichi was strong, but after all, not so strong as to keep him separated from his mother for hours. One day, a few days before she fell into a critical condition, Otami was looking hard into Jiro's face and turned her eyes to Grandmother Masaki. She said, "Did you find out where Ohama lives?" Jiro had almost forgotten Ohama, and her name sounded like a strange one to his ears. Besides, as far as he knew, his mother and Ohama were not on good terms with each other. He was more surprised than delighted to hear her name after a long absence. "Oh yes, but didn't I tell you?" said Grandmother. "The police kindly found it for us. She's still working at the coal mine." "Can I ask you, Mother, to ask her to come?" said Otami. "Really? If you want to see her so much, we can send a telegram right away," she said. "But are you all right? I'm afraid you may be upset when you meet her after a long time. If you get excited, it will affect your condition, won't it?" To tell the truth, Grandmother Masaki had written to her a few days before and asked her to come as soon as the telegram reached her. He also enclosed some money in it, but it was concealed from Otami. "I'll be all right, Mother," said Otami, turning to Jiro with a faint smile. A telegram was sent to Ohama at once. After that, Jiro looked as if he were walking on air. But it was not simply because he was beside himself with joy. He was really filled with joy in the hope of meeting his old nurse again, but at the same time felt uneasy. Jiro was well aware of his excitement himself. He tried to hide it from Otami in vain. He popped in and out of the room without any reason. Picking up the medicine bottle, he read its scale or pulled the cork out. He looked out at the garden absent-mindedly and suddenly turned to Otami to gaze into her face. Otami was watching Jiro with a smile all the time. When he met with her smile, Jiro felt restless. Ohama was supposed to reach by the next evening if she started the moment she received the telegram. Jiro was told that by Grandmother, but when the time of her arrival approached the next day, he pretended that he had completely forgotten it and would not leave his mother's beside. Nevertheless, what he said or did was out of tune. He was so preoccupied with his old nurse that her image appeared again and again in his mind. For its vagueness, it made him feel as if he were dragged into the mist. "Ohama arrived," shouted Seikichi to Jiro, coming to the veranda barefoot, and retreated in haste. Jiro wanted to rise up right away but calmed himself down. "Go to meet her quickly, Jiro," said grandmother and Otami almost at the same time. He rose up slowly at their words and headed for the drawing room, but his steps were wavering, which he knew better than anyone else. Ohama, his old nurse, was already talking with grandfather and Onobu. Seikichi and the other cousins were looking at them curiously. When Jiro appeared, Ohama uttered a cry in a half-rising posture. It was not the cry of joy, but of astonishment at such a grotesque face of Jiro's. She was really surprised to see his vark-colored face with the burn. Onobu told her about his accident. As she listened to her explanation, Ohama looked into his face again and again. Each time, Jiro had to turn away from her dazzling eyes. When she was told the whole story, Ohama edged to Jiro, sitting by grandfather Masaki, and said with a frown, "You used to be a mischievous boy and haven't changed at all, have you? But I'm relieved that you weren't injured so badly." There was a distance of a few feet between Jiro and Ohama. She looked impatient with it, while Jiro was sitting in a polite but stiff manner like a guest at a stranger's house. In fact, he felt it embarrassing to sit close to her. The woman speaking to him in front must be the nurse from whom he parted 3 years ago, but at the same time she seemed to be a totally strange person. It was as if someone had taken off her old clothes and put them on again after a long passage of time. Ohama asked him one question after another in rapid succession, but he answered her bluntly. The simplest answers did not come out smoothly. At times he responded to her questions in a very formal way, as if to a stranger. At a break of their talking, grandfather said to Ohama, "Otami is waiting for you. Will you go and see her? Jiro, you take her to your mother." They rose up at once. On their way to the sick room, Ohama grasped Jiro's shoulders and said, "You've grown very tall, haven't you?" Her words brought back his old feelings to him. He wanted to say something to her, but could not find suitable words. When they entered the room, Ohama walked to the bedside and knelt down, losing her composure, to greet grandmother Masaki sitting close by. She knelt down with her hand around Jiro's shoulders, so he almost had to sit down. Ohama drooped her head, breaking in her speech. Tears kept dropping down to her knees. "I'm very glad to see you again, Ohama," said grandmother Masaki. Ohama wiped her eyes and said with a faint smile, "I'm very sorry I've not got in touch with you for such a long time. I didn't know at all that mistress had been ill. Please forgive me." They talked with each other for a long time, in which Otami also joined once in a while. They told each other how they had lived after they parted. Jiro knew from their conversation that Yasuke died. Okane was working as housemaid and sending them some money at times, and that Utsuru was awarded a prize for good marks at school, and so on. Jiro listened to them, recalling the keeper's room at the edge of that old school building. Grandmother explained to Ohama vaguely about the reason why the Hondas moved to the city and Jiro and Otami were staying with them. When children grow up to a middle school, it's convenient for the family to live in the city, isn't it? She said to Ohama. And as you know well, Jiro spent his life mostly with us after he left your hands. Grandfather won't let him go, and of course the country air is best for Otami's illness, you know. She told about the Hondas reservedly, but Ohama seemed to perceive the family trouble. Listening to Grandmother Masaki, she sometimes took a glance at Jiro with a sigh. Each time he felt himself ill at ease. When their conversation came to a break, Otami turned to her face to Ohama and said sentimentally, "I'm very glad to see you and feel really relieved." "Please do not say that, madame. I just..." She broke in her speech. After a short pause of time, Otami said again, "Jiro has grown tall, don't you think so?" "Yes, ma'am, yes. I was surprised at him," said Ohama. "I feel very sorry for Jiro and you too," said Otami in a weak voice. "Oh, please stop that," said Ohama. "You have only to love our children to bring them up, don't we?" "We have only to love our children to bring them up, don't we?" said Otami almost to herself. "I came to understand that only recently, Ohama. But what a pity. Then I'll have to meet my death." Ohama seemed not to understand what she said, but felt deep sympathy with the sick lady. "You don't mean that," cried Ohama. "I'm not afraid to lose my life," she continued, "but when I reflect how I've been treating Jiro, I feel very sorry for him. How I wish I had been a loving mother to him. I realized it too late, Ohama." "Oh no, you must live, madame," said Ohama in tears. "These days I'm always apologizing to Jiro in my heart." "No, madame, please don't say that." Jiro listened to their conversation in tears. Otami went on, "But Ohama, dear, my son has come to understand me to some extent. I'm pleased to know that. What I have to do next is to apologize to you, Ohama. I can't feel easy at all unless I beg your pardon." "Oh, madame, it's too much. Please don't say that," said Ohama, wiping her tears on the sleeve. She turned to Jiro and said, "Master, how happy you are. You are so deeply loved by your mother. I'm sure you can get along in the world all right. Even if you're left alone, you'd grow up a man as great and honest as any other friend of yours. Yes, I'm sure of that." Jiro clung to Ohama's knees and pressed his face hard on them. The word alone echoed in his ears over and over again. Tears were flowing down Otami's cheek too. Stroking Jiro's back gently, Ohama said to him again, "But you can't be left alone. You have your father, Masaki's, and me too. I'm praying to God for your good luck away from here. And I'll be looking after your father farther away than Ohama," said Otami. "So if you feel angry or sorrowful, please." She could not be heard farther because of her hard breathing. "We'd better stop talking for today," said Grandmother Masaki to Otami chokingly. I'm afraid you'll be tired after talking too much. Yes, Mother, said Otami. How much easier I feel now. Then she closed her eyes softly. That night, Jiro shared the bed with Ohama in the mosquito net. It was hot and humid, but Ohama drew him to her side. Whenever his hand touched Ohama's drooping breast, Jiro turned over in surprise. He could not sleep very well all the night. It was partly because he was drugged by Ohama and partly because he was, as it were, sandwiched by the two types of love at the same time. One was Otami's sincere love as mother that had been clearly reflected in his mind recently, and the other was his old nurse's overflowing love brought back to him after a long absence of time.